Folks might ask me most of the time, Tita, what do you do? Let me answer that question very simply. I grew up in a village in Cameroon under my grandfather. And my grandfather taught us lessons through stories. And what I do now, I tell stories and I get paid for it. So I'm a paid storyteller. Actually, I see some of my students here, so they know that. You know, and that's going to be important. But let me tell you a little bit where I'm coming from before I get into this. I'm an engineer by background. I'm a professional engineer, as a matter of fact, and MBA, PhD in management. I'm an ethicist. I did 2 years of ethical postdoctoral study and practiced that from time to time. And started an academic career here in Northeastern in 1980. I've been here off and on 28 years. 2 years here I left. Went to Cameroon, opened up a business, and thought I was going to go, took a leave of absence for 2 years. I never came back until after, I didn't even come back. I ran the business for 12 years, 13 years. And then I left there and I went to United Nations. Worked for Butchers that people don't want to remember. Then started with Kofi Annan and worked in the United Nations for 12 years. And during that 12 years, I was an officer in charge of private sector development, which was my official title. My real title was director of the kitchen cabinet of Kofi Annan. So I traveled the world, and there's no country in this world that I have not traveled. Anybody that has a flag in the United Nations, I have been there. And I used to travel at night. I took his memos to heads of states, and they wrote responses. I brought it back to him. That's what I did. I wasn't CIA, I wasn't FBI, I was a member of the kitchen cabinet. So I've seen the world. But in that capacity as the private sector development, we helped a lot of companies go into countries that were left holding the basket after 1990. Now, people might not remember this. This so-called Iron Curtain went down in 1990. USSR fell apart. All of the African countries, most of the Latin American countries, and a lot of the Asian countries had run their country on a socialistic model. That means the government was inextricably involved in the economy. When Russia went down, all of these countries were left holding the basket. All of the state-owned companies were bankrupt. The government had no money to support them. They had to find a way to survive. Russia came up waving the flag that they were going market economy, whatever that meant. And for some of you who may not know this, before 1990 in the UN, there were certain words that could not be used. Private sector, entrepreneurship, market economy, these were words out of the mouth of the devil. You couldn't use that. And in the United Nations, when you open your mouth, things come out in 15 languages. And it was only after 1990 that words like private sector, entrepreneurship, and those things could be used. Now, I was the officer in charge of private sector development after that 1990. And I used to travel to countries and meet with heads of state to talk about entrepreneurship, private sector development, some other kinds of things. And they looked at me as if I was crazy. This language had to be learned. But that's different. And companies, and everybody knows a lot about globalization. One of the things that happened after 1990 was that half of the world got open to businesses in the West. You know, before 1990, you couldn't go to Russia and China and any of those places and do business. You could not. It wasn't. So after 1990, that world opened up to multinational corporations. And they wanted to know how to get there. And I'm sure that our good friend Jim can tell us how some people did it. But my job was to help people get into countries. And personally, I was responsible for a group, say, called Group 77. Most people might not know the Group of 77. There are 134 countries that form a bloc in the United Nations, like the Black Caucus in Congress. Now, everybody calls them the toothless bulldog. And they are toothless bulldog. They were formed, as a matter of fact, in 1964 in Geneva. And you will not believe the people that spearheaded that movement. Ceausescu of Romania and some other people like that. And this group still exists. As a matter of fact, their office is right next to the Secretary General of the UN. And that's the group that I serve. And that was the group that I used as my political ally. A member of that group is China. And China happened to be the only member of the Security Council with the veto power. So if we wanted something not to be done, we went to China. They stopped it, but as you know, veto power means you can stop something, doesn't mean you can make it happen. And that's what it is. I know about that. Now, having opened up business in Cameroon, worked with a lot of companies going to different countries in the world, I got stories to tell. But what's the lesson that I want to pass on? And that's going to be important. And I will start with those lessons, and I'll move backwards. Now, first of all, of course, the only country that did not buy into this win. Now, this is talking about free market, entrepreneurship. The only country, of course, you know, is Cuba. And Castro held on to it. I happen to love Castro. I've been there 7 times. You know, he loved my son. And Castro is one of the most brilliant people, fun people you've ever met. Now, he held on to this. And did he succeed or didn't he succeed? That's another story. I can tell you that story. But everybody else started preaching free market economy, entrepreneurship, and all of those things. What happened? Let me say a few things for you. Let me dispel some myths. Globalization comes out of the word, you know, everything has become global. Everybody believes there is something called globalization. Folks, for entrepreneurs, globalization is a myth. Now, every time you think that there is globalization of markets, globalization of production, globalization of the material culture, globalization of investment, and you pack your bags and go from here to another place thinking that they have become globalized, you have made your first mistake. And when the internet came around, everybody believed the internet had connected everybody, and now we have become globalized. I used to make speeches, and I used to say, what the internet has done is to get, now you have to be from Africa to understand that, to get the hyena to sleep with the goat, and the goat to think that he was not equal to the hyena. Now, if I was the goat, I won't close my eyes. You know, we are all connected, we are equal, and so on and so forth. For an entrepreneur, folks, globalization is a myth.